recording live from Austin, Texas. And with me today is a very, 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 very special guest, Dave Sheffield, non-sitting elder.
What?
Yeah, this is a very big deal.
It is.
Non-sitting elder at Wells Branch Community Church and the finance chair of our church. He makes sure that all things are spent well and rightly accounted for. And so, Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
And also excited to have one and only Catie Sas, who always makes things never boring.
Oh, good. What a great compliment.
So today we're going to do a special podcast on stewardship. And this is one of those topics that's always difficult because, and maybe you can explain this, because not only are you all those things, but you're also a financial coach.
Yes.
Like, what's the name of your business that you financially coach?
Financial Coaching ATX.
Financial Coaching ATX. So this is one of the things that you are always having to get to, which is how do you make money not too personal or private to talk about? I think what happens is it ends up being superficial.
Yeah. So when I'm coaching someone, they're usually pretty desperate by the time they get to that point. So a lot of the superficiality drops in that case because they need help and they're willing to share whatever details. I think the harder spot you're talking about is in a discipleship relationship. So then you get a whole different thing. People definitely put up barriers around all of that. But I think it's, important, honestly, critical to get past that. And that's really, I think, the premise of stewardship.
Yeah, so let's talk about that real quick. And I'm glad Catie is here. Like, Catie, talk to me. I don't know if you've ever had any difficulty getting to authentic and real. But Dave actually coached you and Ryan when you guys got married.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like for you on just getting real with your finances?
So I'm not going to lie. The whole meeting is kind of a blur. I don't really remember being engaged in that meeting. And which I wasn't really worried about it because I knew, based on Ryan's personality, that he was going to want to control the finances. And I was totally fine with that.
Okay.
I was single and I was terrible with finances. I didn't want to do any of it anymore. I didn't want to pay bills anymore. I didn't want to have to think about how much money we had in the bank account. I just didn't care.
So did you have any debt?
Oh yeah, a ton. Yeah, I had college debt, car debt, and then like family debt where like family members had helped me through college and then I needed to pay that back. So
like, what did you bring to the table?
Financially, absolutely nothing.
I mean, like, how much debt did you bring to the table?
I was like, what did I contribute to the marriage? Well, not a lot, guys. Oh yeah, it was like around $40,000.
Okay. Go ahead. You guys more to that?
No.
Okay.
Not
So
anymore.
I think, not that makes you a bad person, but it does sometimes give us an indication of our spiritual condition. And we're going to talk more about kind of how Dave coached you through some of those issues. But Dave, talk to us about how is money just like an indicator of our spiritual condition, especially when we're talking about discipleship?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite authors that we've talked about here a lot is Randy Alcorn. He wrote The Treasure Principle. Mm-hmm. He also wrote a longer book, Money, Possessions, and Eternity. And a lot of he's really helped highlight the biblical principles around stewardship that I really camp out on. And that's one of his principles, right, is that what we do with our money is a powerful indicator of our spiritual condition. And I love the way he describes it. He uses 3 stories from the Bible to really illustrate that. The widow's mite, the rich young ruler, and Zacchaeus. So if you think about the widow's mite, it's kind of a strange story. Jesus is sitting there, so this is from Luke 21, and he's watching what people give in the offering plate, which is odd to begin with, but that's what he was doing. And, he sees what the rich people give, and he sees what the poor widow gives, and he says, truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for they contributed out of their abundance. She, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. So he made an assessment based on what he saw them do with their money.
Right.
So that's one example. The rich young ruler, you remember him, he came and said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? So this is from Mark 10, and the famous, just back finished part of the story, Jesus tells him, well, what do the commandments say? And
Yeah.
he rattles them off, and the young guy says, well, I've done all of those.
What else is left?
Yeah, what else is left? And it says, Jesus, looking at him, loved him
Right.
and said to him, you lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. And the young man couldn't take it. Disheartened by the saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. So,
I love that just thought, because here's Jesus. I'm loving you well. Give away everything you have to the poor and then follow me. That's the best way for me to love you. To which I think most of us would be like, what other love do you have back there? Do you have any other love techniques? Really, that's not my my love language. So what else you got? But I think that was actually a really powerful, obviously, indicator, a measuring stick of his spiritual condition.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, Jesus was God, so he could read people so quickly like that. It takes us a lot longer. So going back to your point about you have to get past the superficial part, because if you're talking to me, I'm not Jesus.
Right.
So I'm not going to be able to read it that quickly.
It's like, aha, here's your problem.
And the last one was the one you preached on Sunday, Zacchaeus from Luke 19. And he was a wee little man.
Yeah.
Wee little man was he. But that was
You
not
can't
the
help.
point.
Anytime I say Zacchaeus, a wee little man was he. I just go straight to it. Sorry.
But, you described it well. He was a tax collector, right? He was hated by the Jews. Didn't just collect taxes, but also collected enough to pad his own pockets.
Right.
So he considered and was sinful and hated by the people as a result of it. But he wanted to see Jesus. And so he did what it took to see Jesus. And then Jesus went to his house. And then again, Jesus is observing. And Zacchaeus stands up and he says, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, that was way above. That was really a bad economic decision. He could have just said twice and made his point.
Right.
But
He went 4 times.
4 times. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. So as you pointed out, he wasn't saved because he gave his money away. He was saved by faith.
Right.
But the money was such a huge indicator of that spiritual condition.
Okay, that's the part that I feel like.
So was he in denial that he was defrauding people?
No, I think
Like
he
knew what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely. And and this goes back, and I probably wanted to talk more about this on Sunday, but this is all conjecture, so it's probably good that I didn't. But I just think of the wee little man. He got bullied as a kid, and he's going to be like, oh, I'm going to show you guys. And then he's like, I'll take your animal. Oh, your mom, she's having a hard time. I'll take her house. You put her on the street. Thank you very much. And, oh, I remember what you did in 7th grade at the lunch table, and I'll take your house too. Like, I kind of feel like there might have been a little bit of like, revenge. He was good with numbers, and he's like, one day I'm going to pay back all those kids that made fun of me in middle school. But that was probably good that I didn't, because I just made all that up. But I do feel like, let's talk about the spiritual condition. And I think, Catie, this is where I want to bring your experience and the coaching you got with Dave back into this, is when you brought your stuff to the table, why was it that you weren't concerned about, I don't know, I don't want anyone to see what I have?
No, I didn't think it was a big deal.
What do you mean?
Like I grew up in a household where debt was like a normal thing.
Sure.
Everyone had debt. It didn't matter how much debt you had. We had credit. Debt was not a negative thing.
Okay.
And so when Ryan had this conversation with me of how much debt I had, I was so offended. I was like, what? Like, my debt has anything to do with your decision on whether you should marry me or not? Like, what is... I just was like, are you ridiculous? And then he's like, well, my dad was talking, and he brought his dad's opinions
Oh, that
into
must have gone
it.
over well.
And because he's like, yeah, my dad, and we were talking about it, and he's just wanting me to make sure, like, I know what I'm doing and, like, know what I'm getting into, and da-da-da. And I was like, your dad wants to make sure you, like, know what you're getting into? Like, what is going on? And so I took that as like knowing Robert now, it's not like Robert was like, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, you should marry her. She's got too much debt. And I was like, that shouldn't be an indicator of whether or not you want to marry someone. Like, debt can be paid off whenever. Like, it's not a big deal. That's just what I thought. And like, living with debt wasn't something that made me feel heavy as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents said we were poor all the time, but we had plenty of credit cards. So I was like, So when he said me and my dad were talking about it, I took that as like, your dad doesn't think you should marry me.
Okay.
Just because of debt. And so then I guess Ryan, I mean, it was our first like huge fight. And I guess Ryan went back to Robert and said how he felt. And so I still remember that Sunday, Robert like talked to me at church and said, hey, I just want you to know that that's not what I was implying. I was not trying to remind or tell Ryan he needs to like make sure he really wants to marry you, even with all of this debt. He was just saying, hey, this is a big thing. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that you'll have to walk through and pay off together. And it should be taken seriously.
Right.
Whereas like, that just had never been my mindset.
Yeah. To be fair to Robert, before I dated anyone, I asked how much debt they had.
Really?
I wouldn't even, if they had debt, I'd said, oh, cool. And I would just like move on.
That is so messed up.
Listen,
What if you loved her?
Well, I didn't get a chance to love her because I'd find that on the front end and I'd be like, okay, I now know not to love you.
Wow.
So I'm just saying.
I feel like I should just, on your behalf, apologize to every girl.
All right, I'm just saying. But that was just for me. I just was like kind of raised in a household that like completely opposite of yours. So it was like.
Yeah, just like Ryan.
Right. It was like never do debt. Like, so for example, at West Point, that we were given what's called a cow loan, which is just, this is weird, but all juniors at West Point are called cows. And you're given an interest-free loan. And I was the only person in the whole academy not to take it. I was like, nope, I'm good. I don't need a loan. And because I never wanted to have to pay anything back. Now, granted, could have put in the stock market, which a lot of my friends did. But then when the stock market crashed, I'm sorry. That was after 2001, the stock market did crash and they did not get a return on their investment. Anyway, so all that to say, there's different ways that we're raised, right? And I think that brings, for you, it wasn't even a part of like your spiritual condition until you learned. And I would say like I wasn't raised with like a theological viewpoint on money. It was just like my mom had this sort of view, borrowing or loaning, that's what poor people do. You will not be poor. And I was like, oh, got it. I will not do that.
I just don't see anything wrong with being poor.
Well, right. So again, there's the difference of being raised differently. So anyway, so now you have this understanding of just from a theological framework, how did that, because you came in with a completely different viewpoint with what Ryan had, mm-hmm. and did it make you feel like less than?
Yes. So yeah. I lived with this burden. I am a burden because of my debt mindset for like at least the first year.
Like how did that like manifest?
Bitterness.
Like what do you mean? You get bitter at Ryan or get bitter at God?
At Ryan. And I would feel like I need to like make it up to him. Like I would need.
Because he paid off your debt. He
paid off my debt. So I owe him being the best wife possible and doing whatever he wanted to do. I felt like I didn't have an opinion on anything. Like I had whatever he wanted to do with the finances, I had to submit and I had to go, okay, you paid off. Like my reminder was he paid off your debt. So you owe him.
Right.
You are not allowed to have a say.
Wow. So how did that affect your marriage?
Not great, guys. Not great. And Ryan kept reminding me, it didn't matter how often he told me. He's like, I don't hold it against you. We're paying.
How did you come to believe that he didn't hold it against you?
Just over time of telling myself. Like over time of saying, Catie, you have to believe him. You have to believe him or you are going to be miserable.
That's
like
good.
It wasn't this magical thing. It was over time, the discipline and the work it took to really believe someone.
Wow, I really love the way, this is really cool that you said work to believe. And I think there's a lot of truth in this. Is when people talk about, now I'm going on a tangent, but working out your salvation with fear and trembling, you have to come to this place of believing that Jesus really died on the cross for your sins, really rose from the dead, and that you don't live with obligatory guilt towards Jesus, because that creates like this weird thing, but you live out of the joy of the freedom you have in him. And so I'm not saying calling your husband Jesus or anything, but
No.
but he did do that for you, where it was I paid your debt out of the joy that was in his heart to marry you.
Yeah. And I had to overcome the fear that, oh, you're just tired of being single. You just are ready to have sex. You just want to marry me. So you'll just do whatever it takes to get there.
And so you did that is a lot of work to overcome. And that is why I feel like what you're really special in the sense of that you acknowledge that, and you're able to work through that by faith, as opposed to by like, I finally paid it off, by my photography business finally kicked in, and I paid him back every cent, and we're dead even now.
And I'm not gonna lie and say that tendency doesn't still come up.
Yeah.
And I still have to fight back that insecurity. Like that fear and insecurity still comes up.
Well, and I think that's real. That's the genuine part of working out your salvation, working out love.
The work it takes to truly overcome an insecurity.
Okay, let's talk. I'm going to minor shift because I think this is good. Because we're going to talk about, we talked about the widow's mite, we talked about the rich young ruler, we talked about Zacchaeus, and in the end, it was really all about giving. So let me ask the question that everyone, I get this a lot. How much do I give, Dave? What does God want from me?
Yeah, it's a great. Let me, if I can, backtrack slightly and then come back to that. Because we're talking about stewardship, and I think a lot of times we get stuck in this place when we talk about stewardship on the giving.
Right.
Because stewardship is everything that we do with our money.
Isn't there a rule? Like it's 10%
again?
or something?
Just use the rule, 10%. All right, done. Next question. No, the problem is that when we start talking about stewardship, and a lot of times this happens in the church, is that we only talk about giving.
Exactly.
Which is, using your 10% rule, is only 10%. So what about the other 90%? Doesn't that matter? And that's where, honestly, I spend the bulk of my time in coaching. Besides marriage counseling, that's actually the part I remember talking with you guys. It was a whole lot less about budgeting and that sort of thing, and a whole lot more about dealing with the emotional side of the debt.
That's good.
I mean, I love the whole conversation that how much it parallels our salvation, and we feel like we need to earn it, and so we keep trying. And anyway, so back to giving. Let me first talk one more thing about stewardship.
So it's not how much, it's stewardship.
Yeah, exactly. And when we say stewardship, just to define our terms, you've done this many times from the pulpit, and I love it. A steward is simply a manager.
Yeah.
Right? And so the thing we get kind of wonky about is we get our roles confused. Like, we have to remember God is the owner.
Yes.
And we're the manager. So God has a role as owner and provider, and our role is to manage what he's provided for us. But the role of a manager is not to manage it like how you want to. You manage it like the owner wants it managed. So that's why we keep turning to the Bible for these principles of how to manage the money. So again, you go back to giving. Well, what does the Bible say about giving?
I want to pause on that because I feel like I don't want to brush over the owner-manager thing, because I feel like that's so important. Because what ultimately happens for people is I think they do get into, well, I earned it. I made it. And how do you help people sort of get to the place of being an owner versus not being an owner, being a manager? How do you get them there?
It's a lot of different ways. I'll tell you, when I first took one of my, it was a Crown Ministries class.
Oh, it was old school.
Yeah, and this was long ago, and it was taught by an elder from the church that planted this one, from now Parkway. And he said what he did to try and drive this home was he took a bunch of sticky notes and he wrote God's TV, and he stuck it on the TV, and he wrote God's car, and he stuck it on the dash, and God's refrigerator, and he stuck it. So everywhere he went, I mean, this sounds really stupid, but you're going to be reminded all throughout the day that everything that you have is actually God's, and you're just managing it.
So good. I feel like for some of you listening, watching, you need to do that. You need to take a sticky note on your most prized possession and remind yourself you are only a temporary owner. It's either going to go to somebody else's garage, it becomes somebody else's treasure in a garage sale or used car, or it's going in the trash eventually. You're a temporary owner of whatever this thing is. Ultimately, it's all God's.
You know what a great analogy for this is? Is letting your kids play with things that you bought. So like now Ava's at the stage where she has something in her hand and she says, mine. And my immediate response is, that's not yours. It's mine. And I'm letting you play with it.
Right.
Mama bought it and I'm letting you play with it.
That's
It's not
good.
yours. And then, but like when I say that, I'm instantly reminded like, oh, that's how God sees it.
Yeah.
Like God joyfully provides and he's allowing us to enjoy what he provides.
Perfect. So then in that vein, what's the breakdown of how we should steward God's resources?
Right. So, I mean, it basically breaks down to you can probably categorize it in these three areas, which is giving, saving, and spending.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we talk the most in church about the giving.
Right.
But the saving and spending are, you do, for most people, you're dealing with more money saving and spending than you are on the giving.
Right.
So you don't want to neglect any of them.
Okay, so where should we start?
All right, let's go dive into giving again. So
How much do I give?
So what is the biblical principle on giving? I go to 2 Corinthians 9, 10 and 11.
Okay.
So let me just read that. It says, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way. Why? To be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. So the ultimate goal in all of that is the glory and thanksgiving to God.
Yep.
But the Bible says that I'll be enriched in every way to be generous in every way. So the blessings from God are meant for that purpose, to bless others. So again, if I can lean on Randy Alcorn again, the way he states this principle is God prospers me not to raise my standard of living, but to raise my standard of giving. So it doesn't answer your question. How much should I give?
Every person there is going, Dave, what do I give? Is it a dollar amount? What is it?
So, yeah, I think, all the Old Testament references speak to the tithe, as Catie pointed out. So isn't it just 10% and you're done? So there are, if I can break down the type of giving into two categories, regular systematic giving and then above and beyond giving. Right. I think it helps a lot. I think 10% is a great starting point. Maybe if you can only do 1% now, maybe 10% is your goal right now. That's a great rule of thumb. I know at Wells Branch, we don't preach the 10% number. We tell people to give biblically. So that means pray about this to God, but there are biblical principles on how to give as well. So regular giving, it talks about being proportional. So it was a percentage in the Old Testament. It still should be a percentage now, whether it's 10 or not. I think that's between you and God.
Right.
But it should be a percentage. So that means every time you get paid, you give that same percentage. And if you get a raise, then you give the same percentage, but that means more money.
Right.
So that's one part. Is proportional, is systematic. So as the money comes in, then you give. So you can follow those principles. And then the regular giving, I believe, is to go to the church. So
why the church first?
Well, I think the most common passage we look at is Malachi 3, 8 through 10, or, will a man rob God? You are robbing me. It says, bring the full tithe into the storehouse. So that's definitely a reference to the temple. And so I think there's definitely Old Testament references to that. But even Jesus himself, when he was chastising the Pharisees, so in Matthew 23, he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. So his point is about justice and mercy and faithfulness, but he does clearly say without neglecting the others. So Jesus was pro-tithe in that day, and that was, again, to the church. So yeah, the regular giving piece of it, I think, proportional, systematic, and to the church. The part that gets even more complicated, if you will, is the above and beyond giving.
Right.
Because there are definitely many references to that also in the New Testament. This could be outside the church. This could be to parachurch, charities, even individuals that you come across in your life that you feel like God is leading you to help. The one we talk about the most in church is the capital campaigns.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
And that's the one where, we get asked the same
Yeah,
question.
they suck.
How do we figure out how much to give to a capital campaign? And this is one we've talked about this before, I call it the top-down, bottom-up, and faith gap approach to determining what to give to a capital campaign.
This is the most analytical conversation I have ever been a part of.
Ryan
when it
would
comes
appreciate
to,
it.
He would really appreciate this. But anyways, sorry.
So there is an aspect, the bottom-up part is you need to look at your budget. How much money are you actually, and I'm talking about a campaign like we just did here, over 3 years. You're making a commitment for how much you think God would have you give over 3 years to, in this case, to a new building. So you're looking at your budget. You're looking at what you think is going to come in over those 3 years, what assets you might already have, all the things. You add them up. How much can we give?
Right.
And then you pray, or not even then, probably reverse order. You pray. And you pray with your spouse, and you talk with your spouse, and that can look a lot of different ways. You've heard stories of people, they go off husband and wife separately, and they decide what they're going to give, and then they write it on a piece of paper, and then they exchange the pieces of paper, which is always very exciting to see which one wants to
higher
give
number.
more.
Yeah. No, it is exciting. I love it.
Ryan
And then
and I
how
did
you
that.
resolve it. You did that?
Well, hold on. Tell
tell
when
us
did you-
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to hear this story.
We did this, and I told him, I said, you know that I don't know how much money we have in our bank account, right? And he goes, yeah, but that's kind of like the point. Like that kind of makes it a little more like exciting because I want you to like genuinely
$1 million.
think of it. Yeah, I was like, how am I supposed to know what a good number is when I have I don't even I vaguely pay attention to numbers when he goes over the budget.
Okay.
Like vaguely. I just kind of go, okay, yeah, like we can still buy food and groceries and, great. I still get fund money every month. Okay, great. So we do the whole, let's write a number. And I don't even remember what number I wrote, but apparently it was way too high. And we exchanged, and he looks at my number and he goes, I love that is how much you think we should give, but we cannot give that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. It didn't phase me at all. He just kind of goes, yeah,
I make that in 10 years.
yeah. He's like, that's not something we can do. But he's like, something we can do is this. And he was like, I want us to feel it. That's kind of my mindset right now is if it doesn't hurt a little bit, then it's not enough.
Right.
And so even though I don't actually have a detailed idea of what our finances look like it does hurt a little bit because
You're having to say no to something.
there are things that we can't do in this season during the capital campaign because we are wanting to give above and beyond.
Okay, that's huge. And I think there's two things here, because one is a capital campaign giving, which is, you hear from the Lord, you actually your budget, and there's going to be a gap in between. Talk about the faith gap just real quickly, because I think that's confusing.
Absolutely. I mean, this does happen. Probably most of us would like to give more than we see that we could from our budget. And so it may be because our wife is extra generous and wants to give beyond what's even possible, or whatever the reason, that's the number that God gave us. And so, there's often a gap between when we pray about it and we think about a number and what it looks like from a budget perspective.
But does that mean we don't have enough faith, or how?
So that faith gap is how are we going to, okay, let's give what we think God told us to give, but how are we going to do that? What is that going to look like? And that's where the faith comes in. So however much, faith you think God has given you to pledge beyond what it looks like your budget can provide, that's the faith gap.
Yeah, I love this aspect of the faith gap, because I think it also gets into just your, monthly giving or yearly giving, just what you give to the church. Because I really feel like this is something that whenever I challenge people just to evaluate what you give, just a capital campaign, obviously, but yearly. Adrian and I kind of get together, we evaluate what we're going to give yearly, and we come to an agreement on that for a particular percentage. And so how do you determine that? I can just tell you how I do it. It's just we pray, we ask God for a percentage, God gives us a percentage, we give that percent. Dave, any advice on that? Like what that looks like for you? And I'd love to hear what Catie, how you guys have decided that as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's when I talk to people who are not giving at all, or they're doing I'll put $20 in the plate every once in a while, and they never think in terms of a percentage. So when they start thinking that way, the first thing is like, where? How do we get this from the budget? And I just say, well, what can you do?
Right.
Maybe it is $20 a month. Let's start there. What is that percentage? And let's go from there. Yep. Is that where you want to stay?
So pick a percent,
right,
and then evaluate yearly.
Exactly. So the goal being is that, I want to get to 10% or whatever that number is. And how can we do that? Well, let's increase it by 1% every year. Let's see if God will provide for us to do that. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
How about you, Catie? Is that similar?
Yeah, so we have two different types of income. So we have our consistent income, which is Ryan's paycheck, and which we give us a percentage from that. But then also we upped it obviously for the capital campaign. So we give like we have our set number that we're giving to the capital campaign from our consistent income. And then we have my inconsistent income, which is my photography. And so we decided that that's hard to calculate because you don't know how much you're going to make. Like I have no idea how much money I'm going to make. And so we decided, okay, whatever God provides with photography, we're going to give 10% of that each month. So it's kind of like, it's not a set number, but we decided on a percentage, 10% of whatever photography is able to bring in that month.
That's great. Okay, so I feel like that sort of covers, is there any other thing else to talk about in the giving aspect?
No, I think it's good.
Okay, so I guess the next thing is then the saving. Like, I think this is one that we are notoriously terrible at as just a population. Talk to me about saving. And really, what's the difference between saving and hoarding?
Well, I'm a confessed hoarder, so I can speak to that. Can I give a little
You're a hoarder?
A little of my background?
Yes, please do.
Hopefully a recovered hoarder.
Please don't judge him out loud. I mean, that was
I just didn't see that coming.
that was judging eyes right there.
I was just shocked.
So let me go back to the younger Dave Sheffield. When I was in college is when I started investing in the stock market, and my goal was immeasurable wealth. I mean, there's no other way to put that. I was a believer, but it was kind of a reflection of where I was in my faith as well. I was saved, but really wasn't pursuing God much. And so fast forward, once I moved to Austin after college and started reading some books, like going way old school, like Larry Burkett.
Wow.
Howard Dayton, the
That's some good stuff.
Crown Ministries
totally.
guy.
I think you were born when those were written.
So a lot of reading, and then my faith grew as well. It was about that time that I got baptized and really started pursuing God, and started realizing that, there's actually biblical principles. And so growing immeasurable wealth is actually not on the list of goals that I should have. So that was, it came to a head actually during a capital campaign before this church.
Yep.
And I had a pile of money invested in a mutual fund from, I won't go into history, but God had blessed us.
Yeah.
But it had no purpose. It was just a pile of money. It wasn't saving for college. It wasn't saving for retirement. It was just a pile of money.
Immeasurable wealth.
It wasn't immeasurable. I never attained that goal, but it was a pile of money. And we were going through this capital campaign and praying about it. And we had this deal where, based on testimony of others, I had this goal of, that we've talked about before. Could I give 1 year of salary over 3 years' time to a capital campaign? And looking at the budget, it's like, no. It just, reducing our income wasn't to do that, wasn't possible.
Yep.
And then God brought to mind this pile of money. He said, what is that for? And so we gave the pile of money as part of the campaign, and that was really like a watershed moment for us. That was when I feel like I was freed from my hoarding tendencies.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like, and that's to me is the difference. So that's a long story.
Yeah.
To get to your point, what's the difference between saving and hoarding? I think is it on purpose, right? If you're just saving to get to immeasurable wealth, that's hoarding.
Right.
Or
If
to feel
you're-
safe, to feel secure. Do you think that would be?
There's a measure of safety. There's wisdom, and not living life on the edge, and then there's how much does it take to be safe, right? So
Yeah.
you can definitely go overboard with that.
Well, I think
Well, like if you find your security in finances.
Sure.
Yes.
So
Not-
you would keep that, pile
Right.
of money because that money makes you feel safe,
Right.
not God.
Yep.
But so let's talk about there's purpose. I think you probably have your short-term purpose of this money I am saving to buy a car. Like in my account, I have a car repair / new car fund, and hopefully it will get to be able to pay for a new car, which seems like that will never happen. But eventually that would be the dream, right? But so there's like short-term, like a car, but then there's long-term, like, I don't know, at some point I feel like I'm going to be in a nursing home somewhere and I need to somehow pay for that. Give me some wisdom.
Still driving your busted car?
Yeah, still driving my busted car.
You've had that car a long time.
I have.
Since I've known you. Yeah. Well, let me throw out one biblical principle first, which would be, is it biblical at all to save? And I think definitely yes. Proverbs 21:20, I think, is a really good place to go. If I can use the Living Bible paraphrase.
It's okay. We will give the NLT a pass from the ESV.
The wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets.
Yeah.
We also talked, when you were covering Thessalonians,
Yeah.
and you talked about, don't be a burden to others. I think, I forget how it's phrased now. Make it your ambition to live a quiet life is the New American Standard Version, I remember. But so definitely, yeah, there is something to that be wise in the way you handle your money so that you have stores for the future.
Right.
So when you're talking about all of us are going to reach a point where we can no longer work.
Right.
Actually, hopefully.
Right. Or, it's cut short and you're like, all right.
You don't get by a bus first. So, yeah, saving for that time so that you're not relying on others to provide that. Definitely true. So, yeah, you made a good distinction, long-term versus short-term. So we just bought a couch. Well, it's not like we had been investing over 20 years' time to buy that couch. We have a home category in our budget, and with a few months savings, we had enough to go out and buy a couch. So that's short-term savings.
Got it.
That could be true for a vacation, any of these discretionary spending kind of things like that.
So the way you would do that is like you go find out how much the couch costs. Let's say it's cost $3,000 or something, and then we're saving every month $60 a month for a couch. Then you just have to wait however many months that is, and then you're good.
Yeah, exactly. So the car is the same concept, just a lot bigger price tag.
Right.
So you're talking a much longer period of time. So that's where I think it takes more careful planning,
right,
in order to avoid the car loan.
Right.
So that's the idea behind it. I tell people is like you're going to be paying for cars your whole life. Every month you're going to be paying money for a car, but it doesn't have to be for a car loan. You could be paying yourself for that.
Right.
So our example we've talked about before is we're a 2-car family. Well, then we got drivers, so we had a 3rd car, but set that out of the equation for a moment. 2 cars, and we figure we're going to drive the car 10 years or more.
Right.
And so with 2 cars, if you alternate them, that means you're going to be buying another car every 5 years, replacing a car every 5 years that will be at least 10 years old. We buy used cars. We try and save on as much we can when we do that. But for us, that comes out to saving like $500 a month.
Can I ask
for the car.
a crazy question? Because I hear this commercial for Apple leasing all the time. Why spend your money on the bad half of the car? Why not spend it on the good half? I don't know if this is probably going way too far, and you can tell me like not for this conversation, but what do you think about leasing a car in that kind of, get the good half?
Yeah. So you just run the numbers. So what's it going to cost you for the life of the car? And so you do the same thing that I just did. So it comes out to $500 a month, and then you'd have $30,000 after 5 years to spend on a car. And you do that every 5 years. So, okay, do that same equation on the terms of the lease and see how it comes out.
Right.
And if they happen to come out with a lease that's cheaper, then I'd go for it. But I don't think you'll ever see that.
Yeah. But I think they make it so appealing. Like, just only spend your money on the good half of the car. Anyway. All right. So, okay. Sorry, that might have been too much. Now, talk to me about, and this might be like depend. There's always a lot of this. Anytime you get into anyone that's a master of this, it just depends. But how much should I be saving for retirement?
Well, Chris, it depends. So this is one of the things I love about Dave Ramsey and Financial Peace University is that he boils it down to something really simple. And his answer is 15% of your income going to retirement over the course of your life, and you'll be good.
Right.
That may or may not be true. It's a great rule of thumb. So when you're young and you're first starting to save, that's
a great goal.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, go for that. That's not easy. 15% of your income's a lot of money.
Especially, let's do some quick math. 15% goes to saving, and you're already doing, of course, like 10 or whatever your number is to the Lord. That gives you what, 75% to live off of
For everything else. That's right. Yeah. Not easy.
Not easy.
The alternative is you could totally rely on the government, see if Social Security takes care of you, but I would not advise that. And they're telling us already that it's going to run out.
Right.
So don't do that. 15% is a good rule of thumb. This is one of the common things I do in coaching is we actually go through the math for someone's given circumstance. What standard of living would you like to have when you retire? So let's see how much you'll need. Let's see in today's dollars versus those dollars with some assumptions about inflation, and try and do some modeling of what you would really need and get a real dollar amount.
So this feels like complicated, Dave. This is the part where I'm like, I need to talk to a professional like Dave Sheffield. What's the name of your coaching again?
Financial Coaching, ATX.
So this might be the part where, because to model that, I mean, like when you start throwing out modeling, does that make you start to drone, lose focus?
Sorry.
She already went to Facebook.
Okay, guys. It was not Facebook.
Okay, what was it?
Excuse me. I was taking pictures of y'all.
Oh, that was good. All right, so yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, so all right.
Gave me something to do.
Hey, no, but this is important. I need you to pay attention. Because this is a biblical principle of taking care of yourself when, it's like paying yourself in the future. It's your future self's salary is your current savings for retirement. Is that a good way to put that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're just acknowledging the fact that at some point you're not going to be able to work to support yourself, but you still want to be able to support yourself.
Right.
So this is how you do it.
Okay. So, and that's not hoarding. So just to be clear, because I feel like there might be a little bit of there might be a minimalist out there of like, oh, you're not trusting the Lord. No, you're trusting the Lord so that you're not a burden on others for your livelihood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So talk us through, I do feel like there is some approach here with when we talk about retirement or college or any of those things, and I think we've touched on it. But I think the biblical verses that go with this. Talk to me about the get rich quick scheme that's in the Bible.
I haven't found it.
Oh, that is so unfortunate.
There is a proverb. Proverbs 13:11 says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it."
Yeah.
So this is, a repeated theme that it's not going to happen quickly. If it does, it'll probably disappear as quickly. Because how do you know when to stop? If you find the get rich quick scheme, maybe it's crypto.
Or GameStop a couple years ago.
Yeah, there you go.
When do you sell?
The meme stocks. When do you get out? Because you think it's still going, and then you wait a little too long, and all your gains are gone. I mean, it is a very common story. And my apologies to all the successful crypto traders out there, but
yeah. And I think the other part of that is, Exodus 23:30, which I really love. It's when God was giving the land or he's talking to Moses about, he's giving him the land. He says he's going to give it to them little by little and bit by bit, so that it wouldn't be too much for them, because if he gave them the whole land, it would be overgrown by wild beasts and animals, and the crops wouldn't be able to be cultivated. But he said, you would not be able to handle it, which is sort of bizarre, because I'm like, just give it all to me now, I'll figure it out. But God is wise enough, right? God's wise enough to, with our ability to handle wealth, it probably happens over time, and get rich quick schemes aren't really, that's why people who usually win the lottery go broke within a couple years.
Yeah. There's even just the tied to that is the biblical principle of inheritance.
Yes.
You know, it talks about that being a blessing. Proverbs 13:22, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children.
Right.
Multi-generational. But there's also the warning, Proverbs 20:21, that says an inheritance gained hastily in the beginning will not be blessed in the end. So I think this speaks to the whole idea that if your kids inherit a lot of money when they're still too immature to handle it.
Right.
So that may be an age thing. It may be they need training, whatever that is. It doesn't end well. So that whole, whether it's a get rich quick thing or an inheritance gained hastily, as it puts it in Proverbs, it doesn't have a good end.
And I just look at the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15. You know, he gets the inheritance really early, and then he blows it all, and then he comes back with nothing. Not that that's not. I know obviously that was not prescriptive, but descriptive of what happens when you get a lot of wealth too soon. Okay, so what about then? Let's just move to debt, since, you know, Catie and I had our little tiff earlier. Let's talk about why is debt okay? I mean, like, from my viewpoint, debt was
literally
like,
what I've been wondering this entire time.
yeah, like, so debt, like, to me was like the most grievous sin you could ever commit to the family. And for you, it was like, that's just what you do. So
That's life.
Yeah, that's life. Talk to us about debt, Dave.
Again, let me borrow from Randy Alcorn because I like the way he puts it. He says, saving is making provision for the future, whereas debt is presuming on the future.
Right.
So you're making an assumption when you take on debt that I'll be able to pay that debt off. So I'm assuming that the salary that I have will continue.
Or maybe someone will cancel my college loans.
Yeah, you know.
No comment.
I don't even know what to say to that.
Keep going. All right, sorry.
I've had too many conversations on that one. I will say, if your college loan has been forgiven, then absolutely apply for the loan forgiveness.
Right.
But I will also say, please don't take a loan assuming that will happen.
Yes, good call.
Have a plan to pay it off. So then going back to the Bible, the Proverbs 22:7 is the famous one that you'll hear Dave Ramsey talk about all the time. That the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is slave of the lender. So this is proverbial wisdom, right? This is not a promise.
A general principle.
And so is debt a sin? Maybe some would say it could be. Maybe in certain circumstances it is. I think in general, no.
Right.
Not paying it back is, unless it's forgiven, I guess. Not paying back what you've promised to pay back, that would be a sin. But debt in itself is not. But there are dangers with it. There's risk. You are presuming on the future that you will be able to pay it off.
Does that make sense when we talk about presuming on the future, of why that's sort of not exactly the best move? When you hear that, does that feel guilt-inducing, or how do you...
How are you supposed to go to college if you don't take out loans?
Okay, and I love that. I think there's an assumption you must go to college, and maybe that's not always true.
Like, not everybody has parents that pay their way through school.
Right.
And so I didn't have that.
Right.
So I had to take out loans. I wanted to get out of my small town that was driving me insane.
So, and you went to college at the Art Institute?
Yes.
And how'd that go?
It was awful. It's kind of like there were good things that came out of it. And there were also, like, I didn't even graduate. So it's like I had all of the student debt that.
But maybe, how about this? Did what you learned in art school prepare you to be Catie Sas photography?
No, I didn't even go for photography.
So it might be that we don't actually need to go to college.
Right,
Not that I'm thumbs down on college, but
well, no, I was just told, like, that's your option. Like, that is my option, is to go to college.
Dave, are there any other options?
There are. Even going to college, there are other options.
I wish that I had been motivated to do something else.
Sure.
Give us the answer, Dave.
Well, It depends, Chris. The ideal is, and are you guys saving for college for your kids?
You know, that's a good question. I actually don't know.
Let's get Ryan in here.
Sorry, I don't know.
All right, that might be something that we go and find out. Yeah.
That's the ideal. So you've got, from the birth until they go, you've got a number of years that you can use the magic of compound interest to save for your kids' college. Maybe not all of it, maybe just some of it.
Yep.
You can definitely reduce the cost of college. Community college is a glorious thing. First 2 years there, and then another 2 years at a 4-year school. So your debt is reduced dramatically going that route. Getting college credit lots of other ways while you're in high school. There are a ton of scholarships out there.
Yeah.
Both need-based and merit-based.
Well, there are so many careers in the world that you don't need a college degree for. I mean, I'm not saying don't go to college, but like, I'm a photographer. I do not need a college degree for what I'm doing now.
Yeah. OJT, on the job training, you got it. I think, and you obviously do really well. Obviously.
So it's just such a bummer that I had to, go to college because I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
College taught you how to manage your money the hard way.
The hard life lesson way.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we understand the student loans aren't necessarily evil, but I feel like a plan, and I think part of that, whenever you talk to a guidance counselor, they usually say, or maybe this is the part where they lie to you, but they would say like, hey, if you go down this career field, you're looking at a salary of this much, which means you'll be able to pay off your loan in this amount of time. I would assume that's what they would do. I did take the government paid for my school, and so I gave the Army 7 years of my life on the back end. So
which is another route.
That is another route, which was great. And I truly am grateful to Uncle Sam for paying for my mechanical engineering degree that I don't use. But I think that's a way. So I feel like student loans are a way, but saving previously for would be wise on parents' end if college is a...
Sure, and on students' end. I mean, honestly, going to college, I am pro-college. All three of my kids going to go, 2 in and 1 has graduated. I definitely encourage them to go. All 3 very different paths, but all college. But saving even at the student level, and you don't have to go to college when you're 18.
Right.
That's the other part. You can earn some money before you go. You can earn some money while you go.
Right.
Mine have gone full time, and so their work is usually limited to the summers, maybe a small job while they're in school. But there's lots of different ways to look at that. And the first question you ask is the right one. Is it, do you need to go to college?
Right.
And what the guidance counselor, your hypothetical guidance counselor, you're on this career path and you're going to get a job for it. Well, that's a reasonable way to analyze it. If you're on the photography path, you're going to have a lot of debt and you're not necessarily going to have a big salary at the end of it.
A lot of entrepreneurship that
you may or may not be suited to. So
you either make it big or you're kind of...
Good thing you have a husband. That's awesome.
Or it's a part-time income.
I mean,
right?
some months I make more than him. Okay,
hey.
Let's not belittle the photography
There's
career.
no belittling. I think. Listen, I've seen your work. It's incredible. So, Catie Sas Photography. Go ahead and check it out. So, talk to us about living and spending. And I think this is where a lot of us, if saving is hard, this might be even harder because living within a certain amount of means is very difficult. So, how do we do this?
Yeah, I got to back up 1 second on the debt thing.
Sorry,
because I didn't slam it hard enough.
Yeah, slam it hard. slam that door shut.
It is risk. If it's not sin, it's risk. So and it's important to understand the difference between secured and unsecured loans. So when you're talking about a house, that debt is secured by the value of the house.
Thank you. Yes.
And so that's
what does that mean? So that means if I can't pay, what happens?
Then you lose the house, but you still keep the rest of your money.
Right.
So now, even that is some risk. I know when I bought my house 30 years ago, the seller had to pay at closing. So the house had dropped in value. I know it's hard to imagine in Austin, but in 1992, that's the way it was. The house had dropped in value, so they actually had to pay to sell the house. So there is still some risk.
What a good deal for you.
Yeah, buying a house in 1992 in Austin, that was the time. But low risk.
Right.
When you talk about a car, again, it's secured by the car. So if you can't pay, they'll repo your car, but hopefully you won't owe anything. But that may not be true. Right now, the cars will work a lot, but frequently after you buy a new car, it drops in value. So you'll oftentimes end up upside down. So you owe more than the car is worth.
And you don't even have a car.
So more risk.
Right.
The mortgage is the lower risk. Car loan is still some risk. And then you get to unsecured loans. Student loans is one of those, but the worst offender is the credit card. So buying things on a credit card that you do not pay off at the end of the month, that's an unsecured loan. If that grows to the point where you can't pay it off, you're in a world of hurt. That's
garnishing wages.
Yeah, garnishing wages, bankruptcy often is where that leads. So yeah, is debt a sin? No, but something like unsecured debt, like a credit card, definitely really, really dangerous. So I do have to throw that in there.
The
in
door
case
is
Dave Ramsey's listening.
The door is slammed shut. Okay.
Okay, back to spending.
Yeah, no, but is that helpful for you to wrap your head around on debt?
I don't know. I think I maybe see it as it holds you back.
Holds you
maybe
back.
that's a better way to explain it to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
It limits your
if
freedom.
I-
It says, it calls you
Yes.
a slave,
Mhm.
and that's really what it does. I have talked to people who say, I want to go be a missionary, but I have this student loan
Yeah.
and I have this
Yes.
car loan. And I was like, then you can't go be a missionary right now. You're a
Right.
slave to this debt.
if it limits my joy in giving or sharing the gospel, then yeah, I can see it as negative. But all
Okay.
the other talk, I was just
All
kind
right,
of
we'll take that.
Okay. Okay. So let's get into living and spending, Dave. Talk to us about how we decide what our standard of living is, because apparently it is a choice. You're not just like you can live at whatever standard you want, essentially, right? With debt.
Well, so yeah, you are limited by your income. You can go a little bit beyond that for a little bit of time, but eventually that will crash and burn.
Okay.
So you are limited how high your standard of living can be, but you're not limited how low it could be. That is definitely a choice. And that's the principle behind spending, again, from Randy Alcorn, is I choose carefully my standard of living. And I like to point to Proverbs 30, 8 and 9, where it says, remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. So it does point out that there's leeway in this.
One of my
There's a
favorite
choice.
Francis Chan quotes is, I dare you to pray this and you won't ever pray it because nobody wants to say, just give me what I need, God.
Yeah. So yeah, if I go back to the principle about giving,
Yeah.
God prospers me so that I can be generous on every occasion. That, figures into this as well,
Right.
is that there should be a standard of living choice that allows for that level of giving.
And isn't it true, the more stuff that you have, the more stuff that you need to have for the new stuff? So
You said it all wrong. The more you have, the more you have to take care of the things you have.
that's very true.
That's the way Carl and Olaf said it on Razzleflower Island on Jungle Jam and Friends, the radio show. It's really, really catchy. If you can find it, then you wouldn't have to listen to me.
That's
You
right.
just listen to the radio
that was
show.
excellent. That was excellent.
The
Okay.
more you have, the more you have to take care of the things you have.
So how do you know, like, how do you determine this of what you should be spending? And like, because it feels like you have to pay for food, and then you got to somehow do that somehow, and like you can't just not eat. I mean, talk to me about how you do this.
You do have to have food. You have to have transportation to get to your job. There are definitely essentials that you will have to pay for. So that helps define your standard of living.
Right. Is this where we get to budgeting?
This is definitely where we get to budgeting. Budgeting is the way you live out that standard of living that you think that God would have you live at. So those discretionary categories, for the Sheffields, it's the eating out envelope.
Right.
How much money is going to go in the eating out envelope?
Do you use literal envelopes still?
We stopped when COVID hit because if you remember, people stopped taking cash.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So we had lived on cash envelopes for a decade before that. My wife swears by it. She still hates that we don't do it anymore. But for her, it was freeing. She had an eating out envelope for her and an eating out envelope for the family and a clothing envelope for her. And she could look in her clothing envelope, and if there was money there, then she could buy something guilt-free.
Right.
Whereas without it, she would just be buying clothes and wondering if that was okay or not.
Do you do that? Do you use because you said Ryan gives you fun money. Does he give it to you in cash, or does he give it to you with like you can spend $50 or whatever?
No, we have a credit card.
Okay, just curious. Do you
But somehow
Are you
know.
gonna have judging eyes?
No, we have a credit card too.
So
I'll
how do you
confess as
know
well.
how do you know how much you've spent?
Well, when I'm really bad at doing math, I have to go and look at the account.
Okay. Oh, so you do look. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, or I just wait until Ryan texts me and says, "Hey, you're $10 over. Can you chill?"
But how do you know
Is it okay?
specifically? Do you have categories? Your fun money. So how do you know specifically that your fun money is over?
How do you know?
You just keep track of it.
What kind of question is that?
This is too personal. See, this is why this becomes very difficult.
Well,
Don't
no,
be
I mean, Ryan
superficial,
just
Katie.
looks at the account and sees like, okay, are there stores on here, like times that I've gone shopping or coffee shops? That's pretty much all I spend money on.
Okay, that's fair. All right, so let's talk about this issue. Our culture doesn't count the cost, right? I think the classic Bible verse is Jesus is talking about like salvation, of like you don't build a tower and not first count the cost because then you build half of it and then you look like a fool. But and then we can actually use that to real money and real buying stuff, and you spend more, and then all of a sudden you're like, oops, I can't pay for my house. Talk to us about the budgeting process and how do we kind of vary between what we need and what we want, and how do we figure this out, especially if you're married?
Especially if you're married. That is a key point. Let me touch on that first, on the married part.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually one. So Ryan and Katie, great examples.
Does anyone even do it together? Does that exist?
It's actually really hard to do it together, where you're both looking at the same whatever
Yeah.
budget app
Meaning,
or
like,
spreadsheet
I usually
or
look
whatever.
at it and then I tell Adrienne, here's what I come up with, and
Yeah.
she's like, that sounds good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same here. But yeah, the one who is more interested, more gifted, whatever the thing is, should crunch all the numbers and have a proposed budget.
Yeah.
And then you do have to talk to each other. If you've ever heard Dave Ramsey talk about this, it's hilarious, but he says, the one who writes the budget has to present the budget, and he has this glow about him like Moses coming down from the mountain that says, here is the budget. But you have to get over that as the one who wrote the budget and let the other person change the budget.
Right.
So you, Katie, in your situation, Ryan would show you and you'd say, well, that's not enough fun money. And
That's
and
every
Ryan
month. I would love to have more fun money.
and Ryan would respond and say, oh, okay, well, we could have more fun money. Just help me figure out what we reduce so that we can have more fun money.
Less air conditioning.
And,
No,
and
that's
maybe,
not what he says.
And maybe,
That's not how that conversation goes. He says, we can't afford for you to have more fun money.
Oh, well, that's good.
And then I go, well, okay.
all right, well, let me coach Ryan a little bit then.
yeah,
Oh, good.
that's good.
Good.
Because
Coach him.
the thing is, what you're reflecting, this is the common attitude. A budget is too constraining, right? You're not giving me enough freedom. And what that means is I want more fun money.
Yeah.
And that's okay if you want more fun money, as long as you can point to another category that you can realistically decrease in order to have more fun money. It's y'all's money. You just have to work together to figure out where to put the money.
Do you have a tool, Dave? Like, how do you put this on a spreadsheet? You pull out a legal pad? You just keep it in your head? I mean, how are you to figure all this out?
Yeah, all of those except for the keeping it in your head. So some people insist, on the people I've coached, I just roll with whatever they say they want to do. So some people cannot handle doing it on a computer or a phone, and so they're using a legal pad. And
Okay.
that's fine, as long as you're writing it down.
Yeah.
To me, it's insane, but to them, that's the way they relate to it. Spreadsheets are fine too. I also think that not as well suited, but if you really love spreadsheets, you can definitely use a spreadsheet.
We use a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan uses a spreadsheet.
Yeah, at least it does all the math for you, so you know
Yeah.
your numbers are right. And then they have actual budgeting apps.
Do you have a favorite?
Well, I do, but I'm biased. I bought in on this company, and so I get it free now. It's like a lifetime membership, but So I use envelopes, so it's like envelopes, but spelled MVE.
Oh, I see what they did there.
Yeah, very clever. But it's an envelope-based system, obviously,
Yeah.
so you can see
It
all your
fits- it
categories
fits
and
your-
envelopes.
yeah, way to go.
Exactly, it fits right in with what we do. Ramsey has every dollar, which I think is decent. It's worth trying. I know a lot of people that use YNAB, the You Need a Budget, which is also a good tool. So those are my favorites that I've
All right, I'm going to go
used
back.
some.
I know there's single people listening, and they don't have a marriage partner they have to run anything by. What do you suggest for them?
I suggest a friend. So you do need someone before you make key financial decisions to bounce things off of. So someone that you trust to tell you the truth. When I coach a single person, I ask them to bring a friend to the coaching session so that they're hearing this and that they can help them, encourage them, but also help hold them accountable in this. It really is a dangerous place to be when you're by yourself trying to manage your money with no one to answer to, so to speak. So if you can bring a friend into that, it's very, very helpful.
Well, Dave, I'm so grateful for your time. We're going to wrap this up. Just real quick, once again, talk to us about where we can find you whenever we have come to that crisis moment, or we're just at a really healthy place and we're ready for some modeling of investments and retirement. How do we find you?
Yeah, what's your address?
So yeah, you can find me at financialcoachingatx.com. If you are interested in having a conversation, there's a big green button on there for a free consultation. So let's just have a conversation for 15 minutes. You don't have to prep for it. All it costs you is 15 minutes and talk about, I'll tell you what coaching looks like and see if that is for you or not. If it is, my financial coaching practice is part ministry, part business. So for people in the church, I do a coaching session for free. I would extend that to listeners from Pastor Plek's podcast as well. So
Just mention Pastor Plek's podcast on your, what is that? The coupon code? Yeah, the coupon code. We'll make sure we put that on there for Dave's website. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Katie, thank you as always, because your insight is actually perfect for this. And I just want to, hey, if you have any questions, you can always text us here at 737-231-0605. We'll get Dave back on here if you've got a whole slew of questions. We'll bring back Dave and his financial coaching expertise. And hey, check him out. Remember, financialcoachingatx.com is a place where you need to go to really help you take the next step. If you're like new to budgeting, or if you're like, you kind of want to get some more in-depth wisdom on how to take your finances. So from our house to yours, thanks for listening. Have an awesome week of worship.